a kingdom that rose from frozen Viking raids to become the happiest nation on earth. A land where warriors once terrorized Europe now champions peace, where medieval castles whisper secrets of blood-soaked thrones, and modern cities hum with innovation. Denmark, small in size, colossal in impact. From Bluetooth technology named after a Viking king to Lego bricks that shaped childhoods worldwide, this nation defies its geography. But beneath the hygge and happiness lies a history darker than any Nordic winter, a tale of survival, betrayal, and transformation. What made Denmark? What broke it? What rebuilt it? The answers will leave you speechless. If you love your country, subscribe now. And if you love your mother, comment below. To understand Denmark, you must first understand the land itself, a flat, windswept peninsula jutting into the cold embrace of the North and Baltic Seas, surrounded by hundreds of islands like scattered puzzle pieces. This is Scandinavia's southern gateway, where continental Europe meets the Nordic world. Here, geography became destiny. Long before Denmark had a name, before nations existed, this territory belonged to tribes: the Jutes, the Angles, the Cimbri. These were not peaceful farmers content with their lot. They were restless people, hemmed in by harsh winters and limited farmland, their eyes always on the horizon. The land itself taught them a brutal lesson: adapt or perish. The sea became their highway, the longship their chariot, and raiding their survival strategy. Around 8000 BCE, as ice sheets retreated, the first hunter-gatherers arrived. They followed reindeer herds, fished cold waters, and carved tools from bone and stone. These were Denmark's true founders. People with no written language, no grand monuments. Yet they survived where nature was merciless. By 400 BCE, agriculture transformed these nomadic groups into settled communities. They built dolmens and passage graves, massive stone monuments that still the Danish landscape today, silent witnesses to forgotten rituals and beliefs we can only imagine. The Bronze Age brought trade networks stretching from Britain to the Mediterranean. Denmark became a crossroads, not isolated but connected. Amber, fossilized tree resin washing up on Danish shores, became precious currency, traded for bronze weapons and luxury goods. This was Denmark's first taste of wealth through commerce, a pattern that would repeat throughout its history. Then came the Iron Age, and with it, the tribes that would forge Denmark's identity. The Danes, a confederation of Germanic tribes, consolidated power in Jutland and the islands. By 500 CE, they were a recognizable people with their own language, customs, and territorial ambitions. But they were still pagan, still tribal, still waiting for the catalyst that would thrust them onto the world stage. That catalyst was the Viking Age, erupting around 793 CE when Norsemen descended upon the monastery of Lindisfarne in England. Denmark's Vikings weren't mindless barbarians. They were sophisticated traders, explorers, and yes, raiders. They sought silver, slaves, and land because Denmark's population was growing, and its resources were limited. The weak kingdoms of Western Europe, fragmented after Rome's fall, presented irresistible targets. Danish Vikings established the Danelaw in England, controlling vast territories. They sailed up rivers deep into Francia, besieging Paris itself. They weren't just destroying, they were colonizing, trading, and integrating. In Dublin, York, and Normandy, Danish blood mixed with local populations, creating hybrid cultures that would reshape European history. When William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066, he was a descendant of Vikings, Norsemen who had settled in Normandy. But Denmark was changing. Christianity arrived not through peaceful conversion, but through political calculation. Harald Bluetooth, king around 958 CE, converted Denmark to Christianity, not because of divine revelation, but because he understood that Christian kingdoms were the future. A pagan Denmark would remain isolated. A Christian Denmark could join Europe's power structures. Harald's conversion was baptism by strategy, not faith. With Christianity came literacy, law codes, and centralized authority. The old tribal system gave way to monarchy. Kings built stone churches instead of wooden temples. Runes yielded to Latin script. Denmark was transforming from a raiding culture into a medieval kingdom. The medieval period saw Denmark expand dramatically. Under Valdemar the Great and his son Canute VI in the 12th century, Denmark conquered territories around the Baltic, creating a mini-empire. Estonia, parts of northern Germany, and southern Sweden fell under Danish control. This was Denmark's imperial moment, when Copenhagen emerged as a major power center. But empires built on conquest are fragile. In 1361, Valdemar IV recaptured Scania from Sweden, but at tremendous cost. Wars drained treasuries. The Black Death devastated populations across Europe, including Denmark, killing perhaps 1/3 of its people between 1348 and 1350. Villages were abandoned, labor became scarce, and the feudal order began cracking. Then came the Kalmar Union in 1397, a personal union joining Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under one monarch, Queen Margaret I. It was a diplomatic masterpiece, creating a Nordic superpower to counterbalance the German Hanseatic League's economic dominance. For over a century, this union held, with Denmark as the dominant partner. Copenhagen's influence stretched from Greenland to Finland, but the union was always unstable. Sweden chafed under Danish rule, and nationalist sentiments grew. In 1523, Sweden broke away under Gustav Vasa, ending the union forever. Denmark retained Norway but had lost its greatest prize. The dream of Scandinavian unity was dead. The 16th century brought religious upheaval. Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation shattered Catholic Europe's unity, and Denmark embraced Lutheranism in 1536. King Christian III dissolved Catholic monasteries, seized church lands, and established a state church, still Denmark's official church today. This wasn't about theology alone, it was about power and money. The Reformation made the Danish king immensely wealthy and increased royal authority over a population now bound by both secular and religious law. Denmark entered the early modern period as a significant regional power, controlling critical Baltic trade routes through the Sound Toll, a maritime tax levied on ships passing through the narrow strait between Denmark and Sweden. For centuries, this toll filled Danish coffers, making Copenhagen rich without producing much internally. It was mercantilism at its finest, and it made Denmark indispensable to European commerce. Do you think geography determines a nation's destiny? Have you ever wondered how a small country can shape continents? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for more mind-blowing history. Now we enter Denmark's modern formation, where kingdom becomes nation-state, where medieval structures collide with Enlightenment ideas, where the old world dies violently to birth something new. The 17th century was Denmark's age of ambition and catastrophe. Christian IV, reigning from 1588 to 1648, embodied this era's contradictions. He built magnificent Renaissance palaces, founded new cities, and patronized arts and sciences. Copenhagen became a Baroque jewel, its spires reaching toward heaven as if to compensate for earthly troubles below. Christian IV personally led military campaigns, seeing himself as a warrior king in the Viking tradition. But his ambitions exceeded Denmark's capacity. He intervened in the 30 Years' War, hoping to expand Danish influence in northern Germany. The result was disaster. Swedish and imperial forces crushed Danish armies, and the Treaty of Bromsebro in 1645 forced Denmark to cede territory to Sweden. Even worse defeats followed. The wars left Denmark bankrupt, its population devastated, its pride shattered. Sweden became Denmark's nemesis. Wars between these Nordic siblings defined the 17th century, bitter, destructive conflicts over Baltic dominance. In 1658, Swedish King Charles X Gustav marched his army across the frozen sea, attacking Denmark when it was most vulnerable. The Treaty of Roskilde forced Denmark to cede Scania, Halland, and Bleking, the southern tip of Scandinavia, territories that had been Danish for centuries. This amputation was traumatic, a wound to Denmark's national psyche that never fully healed. By the late 17th century, Denmark was exhausted. The absolute monarchy, established in 1660 under Frederick III, concentrated power in the crown's hands as a response to crisis. The old noble-dominated system had failed. Perhaps absolutism could restore order and strength. And it did, to a degree. The 18th century saw recovery, reform, and relative stability. The Enlightenment touched Denmark through figures like Johann Friedrich Struensee, a German physician who became the de facto ruler in the 1770s. He implemented radical reforms, press freedom, abolition of torture, economic liberalization at breathtaking speed. But he moved too fast, threatened too many entrenched interests, and allegedly conducted an affair with Queen Caroline Matilda. In 1772, he was arrested, tortured, and executed. Reform died with him, at least temporarily, yet the seeds were planted. Denmark began agricultural reforms that transformed its countryside. The old feudal system, where peasants were bound to estates, slowly dissolved. Land redistribution created a class of independent farmers, not wealthy, but free. This rural transformation would define Denmark's social structure, creating a remarkably egalitarian society by European standards. The 19th century brought Denmark face-to-face with nationalism, both as a unifying force and a destructive one. The French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars shook all Europe. Denmark tried neutrality but was forced to choose sides. Aligned with France, Denmark suffered when Britain attacked Copenhagen in 1807, destroying much of the Danish fleet to prevent it from falling into Napoleon's hands. The bombardment killed civilians, destroyed homes, and humiliated the nation. When Napoleon finally fell, Denmark was on the losing side. The Treaty of Kiel in 1814 forced Denmark to cede Norway to Sweden after over 400 years of union. This loss was devastating. Norway represented half of Denmark's territory and a significant portion of its population. Denmark was reduced to its core, Jutland, the islands, and the distant colonies of Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. The 19th century became Denmark's age of redefinition. If Denmark could not be a great power, what would it be? The answer emerged through cultural nationalism. Writers, poets, and philosophers constructed a Danish identity rooted in language, history, and shared values. N.F.S. Grundtvig, a pastor and educator, became the father of Danish nationalism, not aggressive or militaristic, but cultural and democratic. He promoted folk high schools, institutions that educated rural Danes and fostered democratic participation. This period also saw industrialization, though Denmark lagged behind Britain and Germany. Copenhagen grew rapidly, factories appeared, and a working class emerged. But Denmark remained predominantly agricultural, and its transformation was gradual rather than explosive. Then came the wars with Prussia. In 1848, nationalist uprisings swept Europe, and Danish nationalists sought to incorporate the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein more tightly into Denmark. But these duchies were ethnically mixed. Danish, German, and Frisian populations coexisted uneasily. Germany's rising nationalism clashed with Denmark's territorial ambitions. The First Schleswig War, 1848 to 1851, ended inconclusively, but tensions simmered. In 1864, Prussia and Austria invaded, and Denmark stood alone. The war was swift and brutal. Denmark lost decisively, forced to cede both Schleswig and Holstein. This defeat was a national catastrophe, costing Denmark 1/3 of its territory and 40% of its population. After 1864, Denmark faced an existential question. How does a defeated nation survive? How does a country stripped of territory, humiliated militarily, and surrounded by powerful enemies find purpose? The answer came not through military revival, but through transformation. Danish leaders and intellectuals embraced a radical idea. Denmark would become strong not through conquest, but through internal development. What is lost outwardly must be regained inwardly. This became the unofficial motto. Agricultural modernization led the way. Denmark transformed its farming into a cooperative model unique in Europe. Farmers formed cooperatives, dairies, slaughterhouses, purchasing associations, pooling resources, and sharing risks. This wasn't capitalism in the cutthroat sense, nor was it socialism. It was something distinctly Danish, collective action within a market economy. The results were extraordinary. Danish butter, bacon, and dairy products became world famous, especially in Britain. Denmark found its niche, exporting high-quality agricultural goods. Small farmers prospered, creating a broad middle class without the extreme wealth inequality plaguing industrializing nations. But mysteries lingered beneath this success. Why did Denmark, unlike other small European nations, avoid internal revolutionary violence? Why didn't class warfare tear Danish society apart as it did elsewhere? The answer lies partly in timing, partly in political culture. Denmark's transition to democracy was gradual, not revolutionary. The Constitution of 1849 established constitutional monarchy with an elected parliament, but real power remained with the king and upper house. Over decades, through negotiation rather than barricades, Denmark expanded voting rights. By 1915, women gained the vote, and parliamentary democracy was firmly established. This gradualism created stability, but also mysteries. Behind closed doors, what compromises were made? What deals ensured landowners accepted land reforms? How did industrialists and workers avoid the violent confrontations common elsewhere? One mystery centers on Denmark's response to industrialization. Unlike Britain or Germany, Denmark avoided massive urban slums and brutal labor conditions. Why? Partly because industrialization came later and Danish leaders learned from others' mistakes. Partly because the cooperative model extended beyond agriculture into urban areas. Housing cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, worker associations. Another mystery involves Denmark's cultural cohesion. In an era of militant nationalism, Denmark developed a national identity that was inclusive rather than aggressive. How? Grundtvig's folk high schools played a role, teaching Danes to value dialogue, cooperation, and cultural heritage over military glory. But there's more, something in the Danish character, shaped by repeated defeat, that embraced pragmatism over ideology. Denmark's relationship with its remaining territories also presents mysteries. Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands remained under Danish sovereignty. But how did Denmark manage these relationships as nationalism spread globally? Iceland agitated for independence throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. Denmark granted increasing autonomy, culminating in Iceland's full independence in 1944. But why did Greenland and the Faroes remain tied to Denmark? The answer involves economics, geography, and identity. Greenland, barely populated and resource-poor until recently, depended on Denmark economically. The Faroe Islands, culturally distinct but small, found autonomy within the Danish realm preferable to full independence. Denmark, learning from its losses, adopted a flexible approach, neither fully colonial nor fully egalitarian, but pragmatic. World War I presented another mystery. Denmark remained neutral, profiting immensely from trade with both sides. Danish agriculture fed German cities and British populations alike. Neutrality was profitable, but was it moral? Danes debated this then and debate it still. Neutrality meant survival, but at what ethical cost? Post-war, Denmark regained northern Schleswig through plebiscite in 1920, a rare example of borders determined by popular vote. The returning territory was celebrated, but it raised questions. Could Denmark truly reintegrate a region that had been German for 56 years? The answer was yes, largely because Denmark avoided revanchism and instead focused on cultural integration. The interwar period saw Denmark building a welfare state. Social democratic governments implemented labor protections, unemployment insurance, and public health initiatives. This was the beginning of the Nordic model, combining capitalism with extensive social safety nets. But mysteries remain about how this consensus emerged. Why did Danish conservatives accept welfare expansion when their counterparts elsewhere fought it bitterly? One theory suggests the trauma of 1864 created a national psychology favoring cooperation over conflict. Another points to Denmark's ethnic homogeneity, making solidarity easier. Perhaps the cooperative movement's success made collective solutions culturally acceptable. As the 1930s darkened with fascism's rise, Denmark watched anxiously. Nazi Germany loomed to the south, an existential threat. Denmark's military was tiny, its defenses negligible. What could Denmark do against Hitler's war machine? The answer came tragically in 1940. On April 9th, Germany invaded Denmark in Operation Weserübung. The invasion was swift. Denmark surrendered within hours, virtually without fighting. This surrender remains controversial, one of Denmark's deepest mysteries. Was it pragmatic realism or shameful capitulation? The government argued resistance was suicidal. Denmark would be crushed, cities bombed, civilians slaughtered, and the outcome unchanged. Better to surrender, preserve Danish institutions, and protect the population. King Christian X and the government stayed, negotiating with occupiers to maintain nominal sovereignty. This arrangement was unique in occupied Europe. Denmark wasn't directly governed by Nazis, Instead, a Danish government functioned under German supervision. Elections continued, parliament met, and daily life remained relatively normal on the surface. But beneath lurked collaboration's moral ambiguity. Danish factories produced goods for Germany. Danish agriculture fed German soldiers. The government implemented some German demands, including initially persecuting communists. Where was the line between survival and collaboration? As occupation continued, suspicions grew among Danes themselves. Who could be trusted? Who was collaborating too willingly? The initial policy of cooperation began fracturing. Resistance emerged slowly, first through underground newspapers, then sabotage. Young Danes, frustrated with official passivity, formed resistance groups. They blew up railways, factories, and ships serving the German war effort. The government officially condemned these actions, creating a bizarre situation where Danish authorities denounced Danish resistors to German occupiers. Suspicions ran deep. Some suspected the government of being Nazi puppets. Others suspected resistors of reckless adventurism endangering civilians. Families divided over the right course. The same dinner table might host a resistance fighter and a government official cooperating with Germans. The Jewish question intensified suspicions. Denmark had a small Jewish population, around 7,800 people, well integrated into Danish society. In 1943, Germans decided to deport Danish Jews to concentration camps. But something remarkable happened. Leaked information about the planned roundup spread through Danish society. In a coordinated effort involving fishermen, ordinary citizens, and even some officials, nearly all Danish Jews were smuggled to neutral Sweden in a matter of weeks. This rescue operation is celebrated today, and deservedly so. It showed moral courage when Europe was drowning in complicity. But suspicions linger about how organized this really was. Was it spontaneous grassroots action, or did elements within the Danish government covertly facilitate it? Evidence suggests both. Some officials looked away, some actively helped, and ordinary Danes risked their lives. Yet even this heroic moment raises uncomfortable questions. Why did Danes risk more for Jewish neighbors than for resistors earlier? Was it because deporting Jews was a Nazi racial policy that felt particularly heinous, crossing a line that economic collaboration didn't? Or was it that by 1943, Allied victory seemed possible, making resistance less suicidal? After the Jewish rescue, suspicions about collaboration intensified. In August 1943, the Danish government resigned rather than implement German demands for stricter controls. Direct German military rule replaced the cooperation policy. Ironically, this made things clearer. Danes could now resist without moral ambiguity. Resistance escalated dramatically. Sabotage increased, freedom fighters engaged German troops, and the underground network grew sophisticated. But with resistance came reprisals. Germans executed captured resistors, hostages were shot, and terror spread. Suspicions about who informed the Germans haunted resistance circles. Informants could destroy entire networks. Paranoia was justified. Some Danes did collaborate, some for ideology, others for money or coercion. Post-war reckoning would be harsh for these individuals. As liberation approached in May 1945, new suspicions emerged. Communists had been prominent in resistance, and as Cold War tensions rose, questions arose about their intentions. Would they attempt revolution? The answer was no. Denmark's transition to peace was orderly. But suspicions about communist influence in resistance movements colored post-war politics for decades. Another suspicion involved industrial collaboration. Major Danish companies had profited from German contracts during occupation. How complicit were they? Some argue they had no choice. Others see greed masquerading as necessity. Post-war, these questions were quietly buried as Denmark needed economic recovery, not recriminations. The most lingering suspicion concerns the government's initial cooperation strategy. Was it the least bad option in an impossible situation, or a failure of moral leadership? Historians debate this still. Compared to Norway, which resisted initially before being crushed, or Holland, which suffered catastrophically, Denmark's death toll was remarkably low. But survival came with compromises that remain uncomfortable. Liberation came on May 5, 1945. British forces entered Jutland as German resistance collapsed. Joy exploded across Denmark. Flags appeared everywhere. Crowds celebrated, and the nightmare seemingly ended. But the true climax of modern Danish history wasn't Liberation Day itself. It was the decades immediately following, when Denmark faced choices that would define it permanently. Post-war, Denmark confronted difficult questions. Tens of thousands of Danes had collaborated with Germans, informants, volunteers for German military units, businessmen who profited, women who fraternized with German soldiers. What should happen to them? The answer was a mixed purge. Collaborators faced trials. Some were executed, many imprisoned, others stripped of civil rights temporarily. Around 13,000 Danes were convicted of collaboration. Women who had relationships with German soldiers faced particular vitriol. They were shamed publicly, heads shaved, paraded through streets. This gendered punishment revealed Danish society's darker side, collective anger finding vulnerable targets. Yet Denmark's purge was relatively mild compared to France or Holland. Pragmatism prevailed over vengeance. Denmark needed rebuilding, not endless trials. Within a decade, most collaborators were reintegrated into society, their past quietly forgotten. This pragmatic amnesia allowed social healing, but left unresolved moral questions. The true climax, however, was Denmark's political and economic choices in the subsequent decades. Denmark joined NATO in 1949, abandoning neutrality and aligning firmly with the West. This was traumatic for a nation that prized neutrality, but Soviet expansion terrified Danes. Better to have American protection than Soviet occupation. Simultaneously, Denmark embraced European integration, joining the European Economic Community, EEC, in 1973, despite reservations. Danes were never enthusiastic Europeans, too independent, too protective of sovereignty, but economic necessity drove them toward integration. Domestically, the climax came through the social democratic welfare state's completion. From the 1950s through 1970s, Denmark built one of the world's most comprehensive social safety nets. Universal healthcare, generous unemployment benefits, free education through university, subsidized childcare, and elder care. Taxes soared, but so did living standards. This wasn't socialism. Private enterprise thrived, but neither was it raw capitalism. Denmark created something unique, a social market economy balancing efficiency with equity. The Nordic model emerged as an alternative to both American capitalism and Soviet communism. But the climax had costs. High taxes created disincentives, and by the 1970s, economic stagnation set in. Oil shocks hit Denmark hard. Unemployment rose, debt accumulated, and questions emerged whether the welfare state was sustainable. The 1980s brought crisis and transformation. Denmark, like many Western nations, faced neoliberal pressures to cut spending and reduce state intervention. But unlike Britain or America, Denmark didn't dismantle its welfare state. Instead, it reformed, making benefits more conditional, emphasizing labor market flexibility, and balancing compassion with responsibility. This flexicurity model, flexible labor markets combined with security through benefits and retraining, became Denmark's answer to globalization. Workers could be hired and fired easily, but the unemployed received generous support and retraining opportunities. This maintained competitiveness while preserving social cohesion. The immigration question became climactic starting in the 1980s, but especially post-9/11. Denmark, historically homogeneous, struggled with integration. Immigrants from Turkey, Pakistan, Somalia, and Middle East arrived seeking work and refuge. Their presence challenged Danish identity. What did it mean to be Danish when Denmark was multicultural? Tensions erupted periodically. The Jyllands-Posten Muhammad cartoons in 2005 sparked global controversy, Muslim protests, and debates about free speech versus religious respect. Denmark stood firm on free expression, but the incident revealed integration challenges. Danish politics lurched rightward on immigration. The Danish People's Party, advocating strict immigration controls, gained influence. Even Social Democrats adopted stricter positions, reflecting public anxiety about cultural cohesion. Yet the climax isn't simply about restriction. It's about Denmark confronting whether its model, based on high trust, social solidarity, and cultural homogeneity, can survive diversity. This remains Denmark's central challenge. Another climax involves Greenland. For centuries, Greenland was Denmark's forgotten colony. But rising Greenlandic nationalism, indigenous rights movements, and climate change transforming Arctic geopolitics made Greenland central to Danish identity questions. Greenland gained home rule in 1979 and expanded self-government in 2009. Full independence seems inevitable eventually. For Denmark, this means confronting post-colonial responsibilities and identity loss. If Greenland leaves, what remains of Denmark's once vast realm? Economically, the climax continues today. Denmark consistently ranks among the world's happiest, most prosperous nations. Copenhagen is a green, livable city. Danish companies like Maersk, Novo Nordisk, and Lego are global giants. The welfare state, reformed but intact, provides security unimaginable in many nations. Yet challenges mount. An aging population strains pensions and healthcare. Climate change threatens Denmark's low-lying terrain. Global competition questions whether small nations can maintain prosperity when tech giants and authoritarian states dominate. Denmark's climactic question now is whether its model, democratic, egalitarian, cooperative, can survive 21st century pressures without losing its soul. Denmark's societal impact extends far beyond its modest size. With just 5.8 million people, Denmark punches spectacularly above its weight culturally, economically, and politically. The Nordic model Denmark pioneered influences global debates about capitalism and social justice. Policymakers worldwide study Denmark's welfare system, labor markets, and education. Bernie Sanders invoked Denmark. Conservatives counter it's only possible due to homogeneity and oil wealth, though Denmark lacks Norway's oil. Regardless, Denmark proves advanced capitalism and generous social provisions can coexist. Danish design shaped global aesthetics. From Arne Jacobsen's chairs to Bang & Olufsen's electronics, Danish modernism, clean lines, functionality, beauty, became synonymous with quality. Lego, invented in Denmark in 1932, is arguably the 20th century's most influential toy, combining play with learning, inspiring millions of children's creativity. Danish cuisine, once mocked as bland, became haute through new Nordic cuisine. Noma restaurant in Copenhagen redefined fine dining, emphasizing local, seasonal, foraged ingredients. This movement influenced chefs globally, proving Denmark could lead culturally, not just follow. Politically, Denmark championed environmental sustainability. Copenhagen aims to be carbon neutral by 2025, wind turbines dot Danish coasts, producing over 40% of electricity. Cycling culture makes Copenhagen among the world's most bike-friendly cities. Denmark demonstrates prosperity doesn't require environmental destruction. Yet Denmark's societal impact includes less admirable aspects. Its immigration policies are among Europe's strictest. Refugee jewelry seizure laws, ghettos targeted for demolition, mandatory integration programs. Critics call these draconian, even xenophobic. Denmark's response: multiculturalism failed elsewhere, we're protecting our model. This tension defines Denmark's current societal impact. Inspiration for progressive economics, caution about social cohesion, pragmatism over ideology. Denmark shows that successful societies make hard choices, sometimes controversial ones. In international relations, Denmark remains committed to multilateralism, NATO, and the UN. Danish troops served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and various peacekeeping missions. Denmark donates generously to international development, consistently exceeding the UN's 0.7% GDP target for foreign aid. The monarchy, retained constitutionally, provides stability and national symbol. Queen Margrethe II, reigning since 1972, is beloved, cultured, artistic, embodying Danish values without political power. The monarchy's popularity shows Danes balance modernity with tradition comfortably. Education's societal impact cannot be overstated. Free education through university, generous student stipends, folk high schools emphasizing lifelong learning. Denmark invested in human capital before it was fashionable. The result is a highly educated, adaptable workforce navigating globalization successfully. Healthcare accessibility impacts Danish society profoundly. No Dane faces bankruptcy from medical bills. No one skips treatment for cost reasons. This security allows risk-taking, starting businesses, changing careers, because failure doesn't mean catastrophe. This safety net paradoxically promotes dynamism. Gender equality is another profound impact. Denmark ranks consistently among the world's most gender-equal nations. Women's labor force participation approaches men's. Parental leave is generous and shared. Childcare is subsidized. This wasn't accidental. Feminist movements, progressive policies, and cultural shifts combined to create genuine, if imperfect, equality. The concept of hygge, Denmark's export of coziness, comfort, and well-being, became a global phenomenon in the 2010s. Books, products, and lifestyle articles promoted hygge worldwide. While commercialized, hygge reflects genuine Danish values: community, simple pleasures, quality over quantity. Denmark sold the world not just products, but a lifestyle philosophy. Denmark's impact on global governance includes pioneering transparency. Denmark consistently ranks among the world's least corrupt nations. Transparent government, accountable institutions, and civic engagement create trust, the invisible glue holding Danish society together. Other nations study Danish anti-corruption measures, trying to replicate this culture. Maritime history's impact continues. Maersk, the world's largest container shipping company, is Danish. Danish maritime expertise, rooted in centuries of seafaring, remains globally influential. Copenhagen retains importance as a Baltic trade hub, echoing its medieval past. In technology, Denmark made unexpected contributions. Bluetooth technology was named after Harald Bluetooth, the Viking king who united Denmark. Danish engineers at companies like Novo Nordisk lead diabetes treatment innovation. Denmark's tech startup scene, especially Copenhagen's, attracts global investment.